sure we see this. So first I want to say a huge thank you for everyone who was here, because I know that in the summer it's really hard to get out, especially in the heat, and then the heat is only going to get worse through this weekend. But things are definitely heating up in our movement. And not only did we have a wonderful and sad rendition of that through what Terry articulated to us, but we can see it every day if we watch the news. And so what I would like to do is kind of give you a little bit of the update in reference to Fresno and the things that I know that are happening in reference to the LGBT liaison stuff. But I also would kind of like to talk a little bit about the lessons that I've learned from some of the national political organizing, and specifically talk to the idea of what we might be able to do moving forward. So if y'all are interested in that kind of conversation, then that's what I'm here for. First off, under 4 different administrations, starting with Alan Autry, I have been personally involved with trying to advocate to have an LGBT liaison on staff within city government. The reason for that is if you look at any major cities across the United States and even international countries with large cities, you will see that LGBT representation in city government creates not only access, because you hear about through the pipeline, the grants that are out there, the funding that's possible, but it also gives an ear to the politician about what the troubles are that are going on in the community, but it also gives a voice for the community that is suffering. And so, for example, right now, we know that in our local communities, there are things that are beginning to ramp up more vehemently and feel even more emboldened. And that is only going to continue to happen through 2024, if not after that. But we know that that is the staple of how they are organizing right now, is they are putting the target on us. Right. They're using that to fundraise, and they're building a more aggressive base. And that aggressive base is either going to, scare us into the closet as allies and as out constituents, or it's going to embolden us to say, and allies to say, that we are no longer going to be silent and put up with this type of political bullying and ballot bashing, and we're going to bash back by how we vote and how we operate. And so Alan Autry was the first person to create a committee that held an LGBT space as a committee, and it started with the Human Relations Committee. But that Human Relations Committee was more just like you came to the table, everybody kind of talked about what was going on in their communities, which, there is value and power in that, especially when you have a conservative mayor who's going to take that kind of leadership. But there was no formal designation. And then we had the election with Ashley Swearingen, who, if you know Ashley Swearingen's past, she had been bullied by Jim Franklin to change her position around Prop 8, and she publicly had come out in support of us, and then changed her position after being bullied by the pastor. After she was elected, she was lobbied by many people, not only me, but many other people, to make sure that she changed her heart and mind around our issues. And she authentically did that, and then began to include LGBT people in representation, but never a paid position. What we know about Ashley right now is that she's doing very progressive work, and I think that that is something to be heralded and celebrated. She's working for the Central Valley Foundation as their leader. And if you watch a lot of the things that she's doing, all of it is inclusive of LGBTQ rhetoric. So that is an example of, if you do focus on trying to challenge politicians to not leave us behind, that you could potentially change their heart and mind and their politics, which could potentially help us. Now, after that, we got Lee Brand. And Lee Brand was lobbied, but you can imagine what that was like. He was no different than a Brett Feld. And the only difference is Lee Brand was in it for himself and his political development contracts. And that's the reason that you didn't see him long-term in mayoral politics, because he got what he wanted and then he left. And now we have Jerry Dyer, and no matter what you think about him as a chief of police, What I do know about Kim in my personal conversations is that his story of transformation comes from attending the Fresno City College flag raising 3 years ago, where Carol Goldsmith gave a speech about the fact that she had been kicked out of her home not once but twice by her parents. And on that very same day, he was supposed to be driving from Fresno City back to City Hall with a meeting of 20 conservative pastors who were lobbying him to not raise the rainbow flag. And this was 3 years ago. After Carol's speech, he came to his office, and I know this for people who work inside, this is not just a Jerry story. He came back to his office. He refused to meet with the 20 religious leaders that were there. And he said that it was Carol's story about the discrimination that she faced as a young child. And he had a moment of transformation, thinking that this woman that he had such admiration for had actually dealt under those circumstances from rhetoric that could potentially have come from a church like his. And that's his words, not anybody else's. And if you've seen him at the flag races for the last 3 years, he publicly will say that, and it is recorded and put on our local televisions for news and, you know, Fresno Bee reporting. So my point is that if we don't challenge political leadership to at least hear our stories, to know our passion about being equal and having full dignity, then we can't blame them for not doing something about it. If we are going to be closeted by our own unwillingness, then their willingness to closet us is not something that we should be surprised by. Now, that doesn't mean that you have to chain yourself to the White House fence, but that does mean that coming to meetings like this and spending time between this meeting and the next meeting to organize is so important. And it's important, in my opinion, not just from the standpoint of I wrote a check, but what could I do to call a meeting with someone who is doing something, or plan a oppositional reaction to what is happening. So, for example, last night at the Clovis City Council, if you have not watched or listened to the video on YouTube, where 43 minutes in, the mayor of Clovis gives a very, very, very prophetic defense of our community, you definitely should. And this Fresno Stonewall Democratic Club, as well as individual members, should be writing a letter of thanks to say that she spoke up in a moment of controversy and she shut that person down vehemently. And what it tells me is that although it feels isolating sometimes here in the Valley, we do have people that are having our back when push comes to shove. And I do believe that sadly, and I would say this to any large scale Democrats, I feel like we are the minions of the Democratic Party. We are left behind enemy lines. We are often put in a position where the powers that be are making decisions on our behalf, and we are left with little options when we go into the ballot box. And so when people are coming and saying, I'm running for office, when they are saying that they are not going to be silent on these issues, it is not good enough just to vote. You've got to write checks, you've got to be willing to walk precincts, and we should be trying to get other people to do the same, because if we don't do that, then we're going to continue to get more of the same. And we saw really good campaigns like with Andrew Jantz, and we have people that are willing to stand up and speak out for us, but we have to be resilient and not give up just because we don't win. And because having a voice in that other side is what's important. So to leave in reference to the Fresno dynamic, what we know is that 4 administrations before us did not approve funding for an LGBT liaison until recently, when Annalisa Perea put on her budget to approve $300,000 in funding for a liaison, $100,000 for the Fresno EOC, as Terry said, and then $100,000 in community grants. Now, what happened at the city council budget meeting is in negotiations, it went from a full-time position to a part-time position, but that wasn't just because it was LGBT. It is because all of the liaison positions were cut from full-time to part-time. So you have a Pacific Islander, African-American, Hispanic, Latino, and LGBT liaisons. So 5 different liaisons that will culturally represent the community in the most marginalized, and discriminated, and oppressed communities in Fresno. Now, there is lots of debate on the value of those liaisons. So there was lots of controversy on whether liaisons should even exist in city government. But as I said before at the very beginning, what we know is that if someone is at home with their partner, the tree falls down in their yard, they ask city officials to come help them with that. We know we live in a conservative bed. And if someone shows up who is not willing to serve and protect and take care of said couple, if they don't have a voice from the city government to call and say, hey, I'm too old to go out and cut this tree out of my yard, but I also can't get anybody to help me because they are discriminating against me, we didn't have a voice until now. Whether that's going to be an effective voice, that is still up in the air. As I said before, we don't know if it's going to be appointed by the mayor or if it's going to be a city of Fresno position, which means it'll be, you got to apply for it, they'll have a selection process, and then they'll hire that person. No matter who it is, we should be deeply invested in who they are hiring or appointing. And we should make sure that whoever that person is, they're held accountable. And because not only will they be paid to be that liaison, but that $100,000 that they're going to approve for community grants, they're going to oversee. So we need to make sure that the organizations that are applying for that funding are held accountable. They're doing good work. You need us? You need that? Okay, I want to make sure you need. Anybody need anything? Yes. Okay. Okay. Perfect. I'm good. I want to make sure. Yeah. You always take care of the herd. Yeah. Exactly. So and you obviously. Wait, but so the second part of that message is to say that. For me, Fresno will always be where my heart and soul of organizing is. But I feel like where we see our biggest threat right now is in the state of Florida. It is not Trump, even though he is owning the airwaves. It is Ron DeSantis. He is very smart. He has lots of money. And he is going to get even more powerful as this election cycle moves to 2024. Currently, I am working with a group called the Florida Project that was funded by Jonathan Lewis and the Lewis Foundation. He is the son of Peter Lewis, who started Progressive Insurance. So if you're not Progressive Insurance members, you should be, because Progressive is not just the name of the insurance group, that is the politics they practice. And so they got everybody's like Geico. Sold. That's how I said it. So anyway, the major funding that Get Equal got was from Jonathan Lewis and the JDL Foundation. And now they are putting their eyes and efforts towards Florida. And if you know anything in reference to the Get Equal way of organizing, it was nonviolent civil disobedience, like he said, shutting down the White House, but also shutting down Las Vegas Boulevard, standing up for the right to serve in the military. Thank you for your service. But also standing up for the right to marry and the right to not be fired if you get married. So it's not only politicking, walking canvases, going and donating. It is also when those elected officials are not doing what they need to be doing, we are holding them accountable with action. And so what I would say is that Stonewall Democrats don't only have to talk about organizing in the right political spectrum. It is also creatively talking about what are actions that we could be taking locally that will call attention to the people that are spewing hate in their positions of power. So for example, if you think about the Matthew Shepard funeral when Westboro Baptist Church came, it was activists that brought angels' wings and shielded the protesters from Westboro Baptist Church from being seen as a part of Matthew Shepard's funeral. It's not just about getting arrested, it's about being that creative voice that can show a city council member of Clovis that you are harming people. Because really what you're trying to do is to give a voice to a person who's going into a ballot box, who hasn't thought really about the issue a lot, but they know the moral dilemma. It is that lunch counter moment where you show them in clear action, these are people that you're harming. And if they don't have that idea, all they know is what someone has told them is that children are being hurt. And so from them, it's like, oh, I've got to go protect children because they said it's bad. So we have to be thinking about what are the ways that we are protecting children as well. Their right to be who they are as children. Their right to play and participate and be authentically who they were born to be. And if we're not advocating for that, then the other side is what's going to win. It's going to be the powerful voice. So my last part of this is to say, I truly believe that there is lots of power in this room and in the Valley. I thought that from the very beginning. I still believe it today. I think the fact that Kevin McCarthy has the platform that he does is a disgrace for us as an organizing community, because we have such power in this community if we could just organize ourselves to remove someone who could be so damning to our community. The issue with replacing someone like that is we know that farmers and agriculture sometimes are what is funneling funds and not really looking at what's benefiting our community, but what is giving them what they want. And sometimes that takes having to have hard conversations about some of the subsidies that farmers get. Although we love our agriculture and we believe that they need what they need and they should be getting what they get, that doesn't mean that damning and putting people like our community as the punching bag is okay. And so they should be able to be who they are and advocate for what they believe in, and we should be able to stand up for our community and what we believe in as well. So I hope that you'll still continue to stay engaged, because it is only going to get more interesting, not exciting, but interesting. And I hope that you don't only do it in the Fresno organizing, but you also do it in the national organizing as well. Because if we don't, then they are going to win. That's just a given. It doesn't matter what we do. So thank you very much. Any questions about anything? Yes, go for it.
So I think you touched on it, but let me just reconfirm this.
Yeah.
The LGBTQ liaison that has been budgeted in the city council, they have not come up with a proposal yet on how they're going to fill that role.
So my question to Annalisa and to Jerry Dyer was, have you decided who the liaison is going to be? The answer is no. That will be announced in October or September or October. So if you have connections and you have a way of asking that question, that is what the question that I continue to ask and have not gotten an official answer is that question. It would be smart to continue to ask that question. And what I will say is that for full transparency's sake, when I was lobbying Jerry Dyer said, would you do it? I said, yes. This is when it was an unpaid position. And I said, yes, I would do it because I believe that it is so deeply needed.
We still want you to
That
do
you're
it.
very and I said, I'm excited. It needs to be from the community. It does not need to be, it needs to be what the community wants. And I love you. You're very sweet.
Is it an appointment or an
It will be,
application?
it will be either an appointment from the mayor or it will be a city position that you apply for. And I don't know that answer. So, and I would tell you if I knew the answer, and I don't know the answer. And so what I will say is that once Jerry said that, then we had a committee that was trying to apply pressure, and you may have gotten the email where it said, and if you don't get the email, then if you want me to have your email, I send out updates. Well, like kind of, this is what's going on. This is what I see. If you want to be on my email list, I'll be happy to add you. And for example, at the end of this month, we're going to have a town hall where it's not led by an organization, but it's people in the community that really want to be engaged in how do we change the climate. And that means, how do we become better allies? How do we become better community members? But also, how do we have calendars that are not conflicting with each other?
Right.
So it's as simple as that.
Yeah.
But we've got to have a beginning conversation. So that's going to be in the future. Yes.
So the letter that was written and sent to Jerry Dyer saying you said this 3 years ago.
Yes.
Now we want it. One of the things on there was not just a liaison, but a committee.
Yes.
So where is
That's a very good
that
question. Yes, very good question. So let me finish this answer and then I'll connect you to that. So once we sent that email out that Terry's asking about, Jerry was not very happy with me. I was in New Orleans and I was on a 2-hour yelling conversation again, yes. And he was not happy because he felt like he had said as mayor, we want to do this. What he was upset about is he felt like it was being demanded by him, by the community once we sent the email out. My argument was, and this is what I told him on the phone, until the position has been announced, it may be something you want to do, but just because you want to do something gay, it's not like a rainbow bat signal goes in the air and it's gonna happen. So we have to apply political pressure for you to officially announce that you want to do it. So he did that. Then he said, I don't have the funding. And that's when I said, well, I'd be willing to do it for free. And I'm sure a lot of other people would be willing to do it for free. But once we sent the email out, then the committee started being formed to say, let's do it where we're just like every other liaison. Why should these cultural groups have a liaison that's paid, that's at that time full time, and we don't have that same thing? So that's when it turned into a full-time position. That's when it turned into either city government or it's going to be a mayor appointed position. And at the same time, Terry, to answer your question, the request was given to Annalisa to provide $25,000 for a task force. So for example, the city of Fresno has a $25,000 task force that's a women's coalition, and they use that to pay stipends for women to be on the women's coalition. And the women's coalition does events in Fresno that they actually fundraise and donate back to the community, like the $100,000 community grants that were approved. So essentially they're paid, they go out in the community and raise the money, and then they donate that money back into the community. In this example, Annalisa was not able to get the $25,000 for the task force, but if it was me, whoever we get to be the liaison, that should be a demand of that person, that there is either a coalition or a task force that's made up of at least 7 people, 1 person from every district. And it should be a representation of our community. So for example, it should have gender diversity, it should have racial diversity, it should have economic diversity. And we should see not just, I represent Fresno Stonewall Democrats, it should be the people that are living and breathing and eating in that community, wherever they live, whatever that district is. Now, could they have 14 people? Yes. But that's going to be up to whoever the liaison is. Does that answer both questions?
Yeah.
Yeah. Thank you. Good questions. Any other questions? That's good.
What do we get on your mailing list?
I will send around my email. Actually, I'm going to just do it real quick so everybody has it. And just email me and I'll add you. So it's my first and last name, Robin. Actually, it's on your thing right there. Robin McGehee under speaker. Robin McGehee at gmail.com. So it's my first and last name at gmail.com, and I will just email you. And if you ever want to be removed, just email me back and say, take me off your list. And I never email unless it's something that you need to know. It has 1,000 people on it, and it was created during Meet in the Middle Day. So if you were here during the Meet in the Middle days, when we had 7,000 people at Fresno City Hall around the Prop 8 stuff, that's where the list got created from. So. Yes.
Cordell on Zoom had a question.
Yes, hey Cordell, thank you for being here. What was the question?
In the chat, he typed what to do to diminish Greta Feld's influence.
Yes, good question. So that's a fantastic.
He's turned out.
So yes, he's almost gone, but he is going to be officially in that. He's, what I say is subtle. It's like subtly asking somebody out on a date, but you've already asked them and nobody got excited that you asked them. So you're going to just subtly do it over and over until you officially announce. So that's what he's doing right now. And then once he turns out, he is going to officially announce, if he doesn't do it before, then he's running for supervisor. That means that he's only going to get worse. Yes, exactly. Yes. It's only going to get worse. And the great question that you have is, what do we do to phase him out? The best thing to do, I believe, is to not ignore him, because what happens is he owns the media space. When you allow him to act out, he owns the media space. The media answers him by covering him, and then there's no response from our community. We have to do a better job of having a strike force. And a strike force is not people who are going to do a sit-in, even though I totally would be willing to help organize that and be arrested in his office if anybody wanted to do that. But
Tommy.
Exactly. All right, I'm gonna take you up on that. But I think that what is going on right now is that he is owning the media space, and what he's learning from that is that he's getting checks and he's getting supporters. And if you didn't notice, I'm sure you did if you pay attention to local media, right after he got all of his attention, then Steve Brandow decided to do that same brand of politicking and started to say he went to visit the library like he'd never gone before. And then he took his buddy Nathan along with him. Now I am a constituent of Nathan Maxton. I sent him an email and I called his office. I even had a friend who is friends with me on Facebook, who served in the military, who is a big supporter of Maxton, who represents himself as a conservative, but a progressive conservative. And he was very upset with my post about Nathan Maxton and Steve Brandow and Bretteville. I told him I would love to have a personal conversation with Nathan, that my family owns a business in Clovis, California. Nathan called me and left a voicemail. I called him back and I've not gotten a return phone call. So if anybody knows him, you should say, hey, I know that a local community organizer has been trying to reach you and they would like to talk to you about your recent oppression and discrimination. He claims that he was set up, and that means that he was either set up by Steve Brandow, which I'd love to hear him go on record and say that, or that he was set up by Channel 30, who did the news story. Again, I would love to hear him go on record and say that Channel 30, because that means he needs to plan a lawsuit against Channel 30 if they're misappropriating his name and not reporting correctly. So my point in all of that is, as a constituent, and this is what we should all be doing, is calling them immediately and saying to them, hey, I saw this news story that has your name connected to it. I'd like to know why you think that's okay. And I'm planning on organizing against you, no matter what I need to do. Donating, organizing voters, canvassing, etc. That scares them. Once you start talking about how you're going to take away their bread and butter, it really does scare them. Now, that means you really got to go do it. And that's why this is so important, because it'll be like them who will cry wolf and not do anything about it. We have to do something about it. And that's why he needs to be talking, not me. So, yeah.
So my question kind of builds on that is,
Yes.
I feel like we're at a crossroads with the community. It's like, do we do the Martin Luther King way or do we do the Malcolm X way?
You have to do all three ways. You've got to be a politically engaged voter. You have to do nonviolent civil disobedience. And then you sometimes have to go even further than that
Your face.
and know that people are going to be in your face. The reason that the Proud Boys are successful is because they are loud. Now, are they violent? I'm never going to advocate for the Malcolm X position, but they are who they are because they also know they get away with things doing that. So I would never be that person, but what you're going to sadly see is if this continues to escalate, you're going to have extremists on our side and extremists on their sides. Yeah. And the only thing that we can do is show the two sides that we're willing to tolerate, which is voting and nonviolent civil disobedience.
However, the media, I hate to use this word, the radical part of the Malcolm X of our group tends to get more of the media and tends to be more of the representation of this is who they really are. Right. Here they are. And so that's the argument, and that's the problem where, like, I'm just a normal boring gay guy, and that doesn't make news because I don't wear a wig and makeup and and so they used to do that when they would show the pride parades. They show the dykes on the bikes and then they would show the drag queens and then the guys in the sexy guys in their speedos and that's what people had a representation of. All gay people are like that, and it's just like that's like 10%. Exactly. So we're kind of like at a crossroads. It's like,
well, what I would say to that is there's two different answers. One, you're never going to be able to fix that. It's like if you told someone who landed from Mars, hey, I'm going to show you what living in America is like, and you take them to Mardi Gras. There is always going to be a sensationalism in the media. And the only way that you're going to be able to deal with that is call the news director and say, I don't appreciate the way that we're being portrayed. I'm going to start boycotting your sponsors. I will call them tomorrow
Okay.
and let them know that if they continue to brand this type of media with what they're going to support, then I'll stop buying your product.
Right.
That's the way that you win with them. Now, the second part of that, though, is to say, we are drag queens. We are
Sure.
the Speedo boys. We are the Dykes on Bikes. And we are also parents and PTA members and, you know, teachers and all these other things that are very integral to the movement. And say that proudly that I'm not going to watch someone from my community be discriminated against or labeled as something that they are not,
Sure.
just so you can get votes or, you know, donations. And that's honestly, if you watch right now, a lot that's going on in the news media, instead of having a trans child come and defend themselves, they're getting the parents in front of the camera. And the more that we can do and show the loving, supportive family member as the ally, that is going to make the movement stronger, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Anybody else questions? Because I don't want to cut her off. Excellent. And I